Christianity is not a religion about God, it's a relationship with God. In freshman theology today, and we did a little bit of review of exactly what sainthood is, what God is calling us all to be, but we had two objectives this morning, and the first one was students will be able to describe various religious orders. I teach all girls, freshmen at least, and so my focus in this lesson is to just kind of introduce students to different types of religious orders in the Catholic tradition. So I give them examples of Dominicans and missionaries of charity and who else, Carmelites, various things like Benedictines and Franciscans, etc. And the whole frame of what I'm talking about in this class is that there are many different types of orders in especially for women, but also for men. And if someone is called, if someone has a vocation or a calling from God to live a religious life, to devote themselves to God in that way, there is likely an order that fits your personality type, your individual characteristics. I use the analogy of the pit to explain that religious life is a type of rope that God throws to some people to assist them in growing in relationship with Him. Some of those ropes are very different from others. And so I give the examples of, Therese Lisieux. She was a Carmelite. She had a very kind of more reflective and contemplative disposition or personality. So the Carmelite order fit her very well. Teresa of Calcutta, on the other hand, was more oriented towards serving those who were suffering and dying and the people who were rejected by society. So she was in a different order. She was a missionary of charity. I have some students who were taught by Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, the Nashville Dominicans, so that kind of personality is very different. My invitation to students is to keep an open mind that maybe God does call them to be a religious sister or nun. It's not like a very common vocation, I think, at least not in our world, but I wonder, and I challenge students to think about this, I wonder if we learned how to spend more time in reflection, more time in listening to God, maybe we would hear that call more often and more readily, and maybe that would fulfill us more instead of kind of chasing this idea of what society says we should be. Maybe God's vocation for us will always be greater than what we think we want to do. The other objective for the class was, and I'll read it to you, is students will be able to explain what it means to have a vocation to sainthood. This is where I introduce the concept of the universal vocation to holiness. Holiness is really just living out the image and likeness of God, being our authentic selves. That means basically, or essentially, loving and being loved. We're all called to love and to be loved. That ultimately is the primordial vocation that we all have. We are meant to love. We're meant to be loved. Ultimately, that is what is going to fulfill us the most. I relate it back to religious life. Some people have a vocation to the religious life because God knows that that is what's going to help them to grow in relationship with Him most. There are ordinary vocations or ordinary ways that we can grow in holiness, and so people being a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a bicycle maintenance technician, that as long as they do it with love, as long as they do it with agapic love, that can fulfill them and that can be an avenue towards holiness. But we also have these extraordinary or supernatural ways of growing in relation with God. We have these supernatural vocations, namely the religious life. They're just very special. They're unique in that they are stepping away from what the rest of the world says we should be in favor of what God truly desires of us. So that's the idea. Ultimately, we're done with the unit, or with the we're done with the unit, and for the most part, the semester at this point. the next class we're going to finish up on the saint projects, and there we go. We'll be ready for another test and then review for the exam.